This week on the Half Hour, we speak to a young entrepreneur who's not only a young talented artist, but is also about developing his community of Vuvulane. Let us join Phiwo as she journeys into the life and home of Khulekani Msweli. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell for notifications so you know whenever we drop a new episode. The Half Hour. On the record, for the record.
Who said what? Everyone seems to have an opinion. Fear and conspiracy theories are king. Surely history has prepared us for this, but who said what? I can't help it, but I keep on touching my face. The mask creates misty vapor on my glasses. It's hard to breathe, and my hands are starting to shrivel from the excessive hot water washes. The news is unbearable, yet addictive. I have to know. The Chinese seem to be prepared, as they have been wearing masks for a while now. But who said what? My home library might offer me some clues and answers to all this. Where about is Wuhan in China? Journey into China by the National Geographic Society 1982. Well, that book has offered me a good background of China and Wuhan. The Time magazine that I bought in 2017, November 13, summed it all very nicely for me. The China Won front page and lead story by Ian Bremer is very much the front page for November 2020. It all makes sense. Finding my childhood photo taken in 1989 during our preschool races in Eswatini, it brought a bit of a lump in my throat. Seeing my Chinese racing partner, Zheng Qi, I think that was his name, holding my hands towards the finish line, a finish line held by a girl who was a primary school senior, 2 black boys following us, and 2 white boys at the back. The full photo, which I cut the images from, shows a sunny day, filled with an embankment of multiple races, ethnicities, watching a race which is actually a lesson about teamwork and integration. Yet the image, as an artwork, is full of symbolism and meaning in our 2020 COVID-19 times. Khulekani Msweli, June 2020.
Hello, Khulekani. Thank you for inviting us to your beautiful, awe-inspiring home for this episode of The Half Hour.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for coming to Vuvulane.
Yeah, okay. So now let's go back to where it all started. You know, I'd just like to get to know you more. Tell us about yourself, your upbringing, and, you know, who Khulekani Msweli is.
That's a lot to take in, but I'll try and share as best as I could. It's great we're in Vuvulane because this is where I grew up, and also grew up in Mhlume, which is just the neighboring town from Vuvulane. And I've had the most incredible upbringing, I must say, with both parents. My parents have been very loving to me and are constantly loving even up to today. And I always say my memory of childhood is one which is just filled with a lot of joy, a lot of laughter, a lot of being a kid, playing, exploring, and really knowing you have a level of good support in the family, whether it's taking it back to my grandfather and grandmother, who they themselves lived in this very location we're at here in Vuvulane. And it's, and even growing up, whether it's primary school, that was an incredible experience. Going to a multiracial school helped a lot, because from preschool all the way to primary school, it was just a matter of my mind being nurtured in a space which is saying we are all different, but we're all the same in some way or another. So it was an incredible childhood, which I would never exchange for anything. And I would never lie and say I struggled. I know so many people will share how they've had a really tough upbringing, but fortunately enough, mine wasn't tough at all. It was one just filled with so much love and so much play in it.
Okay, so you wear so many hats. I mean, you're an artist, you're a designer, and a social entrepreneur. What was the inspiration? When in your childhood did you start to feel like this is the path that I want to take? What inspired that?
Yeah, so that probably takes us to now when maybe I've left primary school and getting into high school. You know, as a kid, that high school kind of determines so many things. And on my side, with high school, it was in 2 tiers. For Form 1, so that's grade 8 for most people. So Form 1 for me, I did it at St. Mark's in Mbabane. And then from Form 2, so grade 9 to Form 5, that's grade 12, was at Waterford in Mbabane, Gamhlaba, the United World College. So that, again, was another whole new world.
Yes.
Where you're in an environment which embraces so many different cultures. So as a teenager, being in that space which says you can be whatever you want to be. And literally, as it's known as Gamhlaba, that's where the world congregates.
Yes.
So one didn't have to travel to Argentina to know what Argentinian culture was. It was just in high school, right there.
Yeah.
One didn't have to travel to Cuba to know what it's like, because chances were there's a student from Cuba or a student from China, from Russia. So being in that type of environment which nurtures you to be accepting of differences, people's differences, because at times, whether it's the creative talent which came by later, it was groomed by all these experiences, which possibly, if maybe I didn't have, yes, the talent would be there, probably lying dormant, but such experiences just unleashed those talents to continue. So in high school, I did art as a subject. I loved it. I excelled in it.
Wow.
And when I was probably in Form 4, and my tutors were then posing the questions of what would you like to be and what would you like to do? Yeah, the big questions.
Yeah.
Because they definitely creep in. And they also creep in with parents at home. So it was a good time for me to kind of really sit down together with my parents, together with my tutors, and start assessing what are my strengths.
Yes.
And it was kind of clear and obvious. I did really well in the arts. But with that said, even my other subjects were pretty good. So it wasn't a matter where a lot of people tend to say, oh, someone just fell back to the humanities or the arts because they just weren't good enough in the sciences. So I was one of those cases where my other subjects, whether it's mathematics, whether it's science, they were good. Yeah. My grades were good in it. So it was a choice of saying, what do I really want to do? And at first, it was a matter of saying, I'd like to be an artist. And my tutors supported it. But I remember my art teacher, I think it was Ramila Patel, she was saying, oh, well, I mean, fashion is also a possibility. And you'd think, why did she assume fashion? And because at Waterford, we didn't wear uniform, which I think is an interesting concept on its own. You'd find that as kids, you're kind of wearing whatever you can, especially as teenagers, you're kind of having this bit of a show-off situation.
Yeah.
So I always used to kind of shy away from big brands. One, because I knew my parents were like, we are not paying this amount of money and then paying this amount of money for branded clothes we don't get. We don't understand what it's about. So luckily, because my mom and I think a lot of Swazi parents would have a seamstress or a tailor at their disposal. So it was through that my mom was like, okay, every time she'd go for things made for her, she'd ask us, would we like something made?
Oh, wow.
So you'd find that you're saying, oh, I'd like a shirt, I'd
Yeah.
like this. And then I think my ability, from art, understanding color, proportion, and this and that, it then came out strongly to say, oh, I actually kind of know what colors to combine, what this would look like, and the concepts behind it. And then hence why I suppose my art teacher said, have you ever thought of fashion as a career?
Right.
And I think after then researching and looking into that space, I then realized, yes, actually it can be. Because for one, I was one person who I think from the onset was quite determined to be self-employed. At that time, which was probably around 1998, there wasn't much talk about entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
The buzzword of entrepreneurship was never there. But I knew I kind of wanted to be my own boss. So that I suppose was in me, that I wanted to be my own boss. So when looking at a career such as fashion,
Yes.
it really seemed like a space which one can get into, and the barriers of entry to start up your own gig weren't as hideous as maybe others. And then I suppose the argument with my tutors were, because a part of me was still adamant, I'd just like to be a fine artist and that's it. They said, well, it's a little bit hard to make a living just as a fine artist. So yeah, so from there, I think when end of high school came, my mind was done in the sense, because Waterford had offered me a place to do IB, the International Baccalaureate, which is usually 2 years, which is a great program which opens access to a lot of international universities. So because my mind was made up in Form 5, I was like, well, that route won't work for me. Because I know what I want. I want to do fashion. I want to be in the arts. Going that route is just delaying me. I know what I want.
Yeah.
So yeah, so from there I then kind of took it in and then studied art and fashion design in the UK.
And I mean, it's interesting that you speak, of entrepreneurship and how you had this desire to become an entrepreneur, because that takes courage. And oftentimes a lot of people are really discouraged, especially, in high school. It's like, the norm is just to go to school and maybe, get a job for a big organization or something. Where did that courage stem from? And that just self-awareness of knowing that this is what I want to do. And though I've been offered, to do IB, it's not what I'm going to do.
Yeah, I think a lot of the decisions I've made, whether it's in my career path or so many things, it's really having an amazing family support system whereby even when I made those choices, the one thing which my parents have always said, not just to me, but to my other 2 brothers and 2 sisters, was always a matter of saying, they would always say, that never choose our career. Wow. So we have the right to choose whatever we'd like to do. They are just there to offer guidance and offer critique, constructive criticism, and they are there to offer any feedback we need. So even when discussing my career path with them, they were always throwing very important questions. Have you thought of this? Have you thought of that? So because I was constantly having the answers to those questions, it removed the fear from them, because I realized it's not that parents don't want their children to do what they want. It's a sense of just fear that these kids don't actually know what they want. And parents are all about you being self-sustaining and being independent in whatever choice you make in life. So yes, they kind of influenced a lot of that. And I think the confidence in them, even when the time came for me to travel to the UK to study, they had that faith because they felt he's quite self-assured in what he wants. He's been taking the lead in researching this, giving the feedback. No matter what we say, there was that confidence in them to say, no matter how young I was when I left them, that he won't then drop what he started and say he no more wants to do this. It's too difficult. Because the choice was mine, it became very easy for them to walk with me through
Yeah.
it all.
Yeah.
So yeah, then that led me fully to be in the UK to study art and design, and then specialize in fashion design with technology at Manchester Metropolitan University.
Oh, wow. So here you are in the UK studying fashion, and I guess obviously the opportunities for you were massive, and you could have chosen to stay in the UK, but you chose to come back home, and specifically to Vuvulane, where you grew
Yes.
up. That's really interesting to me. It's fascinating, and I'd like for you to explain the inspiration behind that.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and even a great thought, in the sense that a lot of people have a particular notion
Yeah.
to say, okay, once you've had an opportunity, especially if you're someone like myself from Eswatini, why on earth do you want to return to Eswatini? And it's a question I really had from so many people when I returned back home in 2010. But because before even leaving the country, I knew what the end goal was. And for me, it was to set up JEREMPAUL. And I never saw JEREMPAUL flourishing anywhere else but in my home country.
Yes.
So, and I understood it clearly that I'm only traveling to the UK to gain skills and be
Yes.
exposed to this industry. Because we can argue a lot about it, but you find that the arts in general, and fashion, if I can be more precise, and whether it's a visual arts, London, and be specific, or the UK, becomes the epicenter of some of the greatest movements,
Yeah.
whether in art, whether in fashion. So for me, it was a matter of saying, how can I go and really gain the sap from the epicenter of where all this world happens? I have to go and gain the skill and fully understand the industry which I'm deciding to be a part of. Because without that, I would be a little bit short-handed
Yeah.
in my ability to maybe set up a company and all that. So, and I knew Eswatini had the skills, the hand skills, because my work, my company is dealing with craft and skill.
Yeah.
And knowing from way back, I knew Emaswati can use their hands, they can
Yes.
make products. My abilities maybe of education is now a matter of fine-tuning some of these skills and make sure we present a superior quality and a great designed product at the end.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a difficult decision to make to come back home, because I knew I'm ready. Now is the time to really showcase what I've learned and share it with more people in Eswatini.
Yeah. So, I mean, with every passion, every project comes challenges.
Yeah.
What are some of the challenges that you have encountered as a designer and an artist?
Oh yeah, challenges. There's been a lot.
Yeah.
A lot of challenges. Okay, for one, the fact that, as we've just spoken about it, the fact that I returned to Eswatini, and that was 2010. A lot of things were happening in the country, and the fact that I'd come here returning to say I'm setting up my company and it has to be fashion, and at that time kind of understanding all this thing of avant-garde fashion, really thinking outside the box, really making sure that the design speaks for itself, and even with art, making sure that you are kind of having conversations which are a little bit off-center.
Yeah.
It was a challenge, because I was like, who here will kind of embrace this thing? Not to say that there wasn't anything going on, there was, but maybe my perspective and the design vision I had was quite off-center to the norm. It was very difficult. And even I think navigating the space of business as a young person, so determined to set up a business, set up a company, it was a learning curve, because I did not even know what it takes to set it up.
Yeah.
Yes, of course, with my work experience, working for a designer in the UK, Mario Schwab, he was really good with opening up all the knowledge, but it was just not enough when you're back at home in Eswatini. And the challenge was even more knowing that I'm from a fast-paced environment. And at that time, the Internet of Things were not quite where they are today here at home.
Yeah.
So it became so frustrating where you're coming from running at 100 miles an hour and now you're running 20 kilometers an hour. And it was grounding and humbling at the same time to know that no matter what you can absorb from wherever,
Yeah.
each place has got its own ways of doing things.
Yes.
And the people have got their own time of accepting new things. Because that was the other thing. I couldn't force people to accept or like or be a part of what I was introducing. Time would only do that. So it was a matter of saying, in this business vision or this journey, am I willing to be patient
Yeah.
in the country? So I think that was the major challenge for me, to say, am I willing to be patient with the people and allow them to be a part of this thing I'm trying to unravel?
Yeah.
But I think from there, having and meeting a lot of like-minded people in the country who became good friends helped a lot in being patient.
Yeah. I mean, I was going to ask what helped you remain patient, but for anyone who's trying to, you know, break into the arts industry in this country and maybe is trying to find their way, find their language and find their identity in the arts, perhaps you could share a story about how you managed to do that, how you managed to navigate that, find your voice, find your identity, so that just you're able to inspire other people who are looking to do the same.
Yeah, it's a really incredible question, because I tend to find a lot of people struggle so much because your own identity, you're not quite sure of your communication message to the people.
Yeah.
So I'd always say to people, the one thing that really helped me was knowing who I am as a person.
Yes.
And sticking to my truth.
Yeah.
So what I've been realizing, whether it's with young people or people in general, is you are finding people are not true to who they are and their mission in life. So I'm one person who's always stuck to my truth of saying, I'm in this space, I'm in the design space, I'm in the business space, I'm in the social space. How can I be a part of that space to make it a true impact to not only just me, but to everyone who comes across anything I do? So it started with that. And then also having a certain level of excellence in everything that you do or set out to do, where I've seen a lot of people caught in a trap of mediocrity.
Yeah.
And we as a nation have also applauded a lot of mediocrity amongst people.
Yeah.
So it's a huge problem whereby you find you're not allowing people to grow to their full strength, because until we have strong foundations in what we do, we communicate good messages about who we are and what we do, you find we easily sway with the wind. When something comes, all of a sudden you've jumped on that bandwagon, you've derailed from your mission. All good and well. An entrepreneurship space always requires you to be thinking on your feet, always looking for the next opportunity. But your opportunities, I believe, should always be within this realm of your beliefs and your core principles. And then if you've got that grounded, your core principles, your ethics and all that, everything that comes through, you then sift through what is true to your core.
Yeah.
Because that way, any new project that comes is still aligned. Whether it's myself, it's still aligning with JEREMPAUL. In all the endeavors you see me in now, whether you're speaking of, at the moment, there's the food market, the Vuvulane food market. It was always a part of the JEREMPAUL entity of a lifestyle purpose. So I'm not deviating from my principles of design, from the lifestyle which I hope more people live through the work I do.
This marks the end of the first part of our conversation with Khulekani Msweli. Join us again next week as we continue to find out more. The Half Hour. On the record, for the record.